The next upcoming banners in Genshin Impact will be Eula paired alongside Klee, Wanderer, Kokomi. Let's talk about which of these characters is the most valuable for you given what stage you may be at in your account. But please take in mind and please understand that I am speaking from the perspective of an individual who's played this for a long period of time, and I have a bunch of characters as you can see here. I have Constellations, I have C2 Yoimiya, I have C2 of a couple other units like Eula and C1 of Xiao. So as a direct result, my position may be different than yours, and I may be looking for something else entirely different from you. Let's start off with our catalyst users, Kokomi, Wanderer, and Klee. Out of all of these three, I will say that Kokomi is the one with the most longevity out of these three. The issue with Wanderer is that he's animo, and for the vast majority of you, unless you have somebody like Farzan, or maybe a Jean with Constellations, or a Zhongli, you're losing out on the ability to shred resistances for him, and he already wants other units outside of his own element. Compared to somebody like Xiao, who operates in the same field, Xiao wants Albedo, a healer or buffer, maybe that's Bennett, and a Zhongli. That is all Xiao needs. Wanderer wants multiple elements because his passive requires him to essentially swirl other elements. I know he doesn't necessarily need them in his party, but it's the only way you can realistically guarantee that any of these elements will be present, because if you're facing off against Geo Slimes, none of these are present in Geo Slimes. So with that being said, you are dealing with a character who is more restrictive and does want shielding because he can be staggered and knocked out of the air, especially given that most of his damage comes from this durational ability. So if we're looking at a Kokomi, because she's Hydra, she has access to freeze, she has access to vaporize, albeit barely. She subsequently can access Hyper Bloom and Bloom comps in general. She works great with Nilo. She's much more flexible, and because she's a healer and we've been pushing into endgame content that requires you to have more healing and defensive options, she's really good right now. I won't say she's a must pull because I do think there are other healers that you could use. If you got a Chi-Chi, you could use a healer. You could use her as a healer. You could use Bennett. You can use a Sayu for an immune resistance shred. I personally really like Sayu. So she's not a must pull, but she is great in certain niches. And if you have Nilo and want to really make that team shine, you can go with Nilo, Nahida, Kokomi, and then somebody else. So she's great in her specific niche. I'd say that out of all of these three catalyst users, for most newer players, she's going to offer you the most value from the beginning of the game all the way up to the end of the game, because she takes your bad artifacts with HP and she uses them really, really well. Klee's our earliest unit on this list, and subsequently speaking, she's also, for lack of a better term, one of the worst ones. She's not awful. She's not Amber tier. She's not, unusable. She's usable, but the problem is that as a catalyst user, her competition right now is Yanfei, and Yanfei has a shield. Yanfei gives crit rate. Yanfei deals more damage, and Yanfei has a less clunky and rooted playstyle. The issue with Klee is that if you're looking at anybody who actually uses her, they dislike how rooted in play she is because she doesn't have any defensive or mobility utility. She's just stuck there throwing bombs, and if the enemies don't walk over her bombs, her damage drops significantly, and these bombs can't be picked up by Venti, so you need a Kazuha to actually group them up, and it makes her a bit of an odd character to play. Don't get me wrong, she's cute, she's a Mario hat. If you really do like her, pull for her, especially with her new outfit, it's adorable, but she, as of right now, isn't in the best position. Finally, comparing her, you have Eula. For lack of a better term, I will say this. Eula is a character in Genshin Impact who has no elements and subsequently has no place. Eula is not a good character. She's a decent enough character that you can make work. Her biggest issue is the vast majority of her damage is centered in her burst. If you miss that burst, she's god awful. If you hit that burst and it crits, she's pretty good. But that's it. She's make or break based around your ability to not only crit but subsequently hit. If the enemy dives underground like a Whopper Flower, you're done. If the enemy teleports out the way like a Nobushi, or has that immediate ability to just heal up, or maybe enters an iframe, you're done for. Eula is entirely made by this burst, which has, I believe, one of the highest scalings in the game. So it's really, really good on paper, but in practice, it's a bit difficult. She scales really well with Constellations, but physical is an element or a status that realistically has been forgotten by HoYoverse. Even if they added Mika, let's be honest here, how many of you legitimately pulled him? How many of you have legitimately built him? How many of you intend to use him? Especially after that VA. In English at least. Physical and Eula subsequently aren't in the best position. Eula's previous competition was all the way down here with Razor. I like Razor. He's fun. He gets attack speed. He shreds defense. He gets, crit and then damage bonus. But Razor has access now to Super Conduct Physical, Aggravate, Hyper Bloom like Sino, and Overload. So he's arguably a better character right now than she is just based on versatility alone. And it makes it very difficult for me to recommend Eula because of this. If you're looking for general priority, if you don't have a healer like Sayu built, if you don't have your Dionas or your other healers built, Kokomi is obviously going to be great because she's a 5-star unit, she heals a lot, she has access to other teams, and her direct competition, quote unquote, is Barbara. She can hold Thrilling Tails and buff your team's, or not necessarily a team, but your character's attack by a ton. But if you don't need the healing, and you're just wondering between these three who's the best DPS, Eula fulfills a unique role that no other character other than Razor can really do. Klee is basically 5-star Yanfei, so we're gonna have to count her out. Wanderer has a nice playstyle and he's Animo. His competition is Xiao, but if you don't have Xiao, he's really, really neat. So it's between Eula and Wanderer as who you enjoy the personality of more. If you want physical, and maybe have a C6 Fischl, or a Zhongli, or any character that can actively assist you in shredding multiple resistances or help get that super conduct, or maybe a Raiden in particular, Eula's great. If you have other shielders built, like a Toma, a Layla, Wanderer is great. These characters are essentially make or break based around the units they have to support them, and unfortunately speaking, the worst character out of all of these that gets the short end of the stick is Klee, because she's the oldest unit in the game. Well, not oldest in the game, but oldest out of these four. And as a direct result of that, she has the less or least amount of versatility, flexibility, and overall value compared to these newer ones. I'd say that with somebody like Farzan on the banner, it's really recommended to pick up Wanderer if you get multiple copies of her. If you don't, hey, it's perfectly fine to skip him. At the end of the day, understand that these are reruns. They will come back eventually at some point. And yes, Fontaine is next. So if you want Folklore, if you want Linné like I do, if you want other units, it may be a good idea to stop, save up, and then come back to these later on when they get another rerun. Either way, if you enjoyed this video, tell me down below, who will you be summoning for, if anyone? Are you skipping? If you're skipping for, whomst? And I'll see you next time.